So Helmut, you were a young soldier on the Eastern Front in Russia, conscripted to fight for the Germans. You had been enrolled to be in the Air Force, but they were out of gas, so you ended up in the infantry. And after a battle with a Russian tank unit, you were injured by some shrapnel in both your shoulder and your head. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Now you had launched a hand grenade into a tank, and that gave your unit enough coverage to get away, right? And actually probably allowed you to get to safety, right?
Not really.
Mm-hmm.
When I threw that hand grenade in the turret of the tank,
Mm-hmm.
the other tanks that were beside there could notice,
Okay.
and they took aim at us and shot at us.
Okay.
And that's when I was wounded.
When you were wounded. And how did you make it back to the first aid station in the basement of that building?
Well, the corporal and the machine gunner, they took me under their arm, each
Mhm.
one, and led me back to the village where the first aid station was.
Okay. Now you were then transported to a hospital in Schwerin. Is that the right pronunciation?
Yeah.
Okay, Schwerin. And by great, I don't know if it was, I don't believe in chances that just happen. I think that there was a reason, but your sister was actually a nurse in that hospital.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, she was not in that hospital. She was in the hospital next city.
Okay.
And when we connected to each other, she could get me transferred to the
Okay.
hospital where she was.
Okay, so you had quite a long convalescence because you were injured in February of 1945. You were transported to the hospital. You were moved to the hospital your sister was in, and then the two of you were able to communicate. And the importance of that is that your family had been separated by the war, right?
Yes.
Your other sister was a telephone operator at a military base, and your mom had stayed in your hometown of Alt-Rosengard to look after the farm.
Yes.
Okay. Now, why was it important to go and get her? What had happened with boundaries and borders once Germany surrendered?
Well, when the Russians came into East Prussia,
Mm-hmm.
they abused and the
Raped.
population, raped the women
Mm-hmm.
and shot the men, and the people heard about that, and they packed up and fled.
Okay.
And my mother had packed everything ready to flee, but she was asked by the Nazis not to go on the road, because the roads had to be kept empty for a while for the German army to transport their goods, and they would tell them when they could leave, but
So-
they never told them.
Okay, so she was being obedient to what they asked, and she actually got stranded in
Yeah.
in what was now Poland, but had been East Prussia, part of Germany.
Yeah.
Okay. So you were in Schwerin with your sister, and you actually left the hospital well before you had healed.
Well, not quite. I was not quite healed,
Okay.
but I still had my arm in my sling,
Okay.
so in case.
How far away from your home farm were you in the hospital?
about 750 kilometers.
Wow. And so you left in the end, near the end of July.
Yes,
And where was the first place that you, how did you get 750 kilometers? And it took you about 4 days?
about, yeah.
Wow. So how
Well-
did you travel?
Well, I traveled by train.
Mm-hmm.
The train lines had been repaired again, and the Russians used them for transporting their equipment.
Okay.
And civilians were not allowed to use the railway, except those who were employed by the Russians.
Okay.
So I took a risk, a chance, and I got acquainted with a person who worked on the railways, and he opened the gate to the station so that I could get in there, and I boarded the train illegally without a ticket and without
Because you had no money at this point either.
I had no
did you?
money, no.
Yeah. So you made it from Schwerin to just a part of Berlin, right?
Yes,
Okay. And then you needed to change trains at that point, right?
yeah, from Berlin to Stettin.
Okay.
And Stettin was a border town.
Mm-hmm.
The west side of the river Oder was East Germany, and the left side, the east side, was Poland.
Okay. So I want to go back to Berlin where you had to switch trains and you got to the train station and you didn't speak the language, right? In that there was
In Stettin,
in Stettin.
yeah,
Is that where the incident happened in the apple tree?
yes.
Okay, so let's go there. So you got to Stettin and you needed to take another train and you didn't know when it would come. How were you treated there at the train station?
Well, I had to be very careful that I didn't draw any attention.
Mm,
But I had to ask somebody whether, if there went a train, or when it would go.
right.
And the first train man I asked, he cursed me and said, "I'm not giving any information to those damn Germans."
Mm,
And the second one just ignored me.
okay.
And the third one was an elderly person. I think he had German background because he spoke German quite well.
Uh-huh.
And he took me behind a building that we were not visible there.
Right.
And he explained me the situation. When the train,
Sorry, keep going.
he told me that in about two days, the train would go to Warsaw, and Warsaw was about halfway where I wanted to go,
Mhm.
and from station in the middle, I had to transfer trains.
Okay.
And he gave me information when that train went and how to get there.
Okay.
And there was one incident I may mention. While I was waiting for the train, there was a young Polish man. He was observing me.
Mhm.
I don't know if he knew German, that he heard me asking questions there. I was suspicious of him.
Okay.
And when I went into the train, it happened to be that he was in the same compartment that I was.
Okay.
And when the conductor came and asked for tickets, I pretended I was sleeping, and he shook me up. And then this young man that had observed me talked to the conductor, and the conductor left me alone.
Sort of one of your guardian angels
Yes,
that enabled
yes.
you to stay on the train and get back to
Yeah.
Rosengard.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were at that station for 2 days before the train you needed was going to arrive, and you didn't have any money. I bet you didn't have any food either.
Well, I had a little bit. My sister had take, had arranged that I had a little bit, but it was running out.
Right. So tell us the story of the apple tree.
Well, since I thought my food is scarce, and I saw an apple tree there, and I thought, well, I can replenish my food ration. So I climbed up there, and all of a sudden I heard a shot, and the bullet whistled beside me into the leaves there. Well, I knew the apples were not for me, so I quickly slid down and took cover, and I wanted to find out who was shooting and where the shooter was. And then I saw him down in the yard. There was a heap of potatoes, and he was guarding that heap of potatoes. And when he saw me climbing the tree, he took a shot at me.
Okay. So was he was guarding potatoes at the back of the house, and he was sort of on a...
He was walking around the house.
Okay.
And I figured in about 7 minutes he would come back again.
So you timed him.
I timed him, yes.
Okay. And so what did you do?
Well, I jumped when he was gone. I jumped in the yard there and started to fill my pockets. But he didn't stay for 7 minutes. He stayed for 1 minute.
Oh my goodness.
While I was just starting to gather some potatoes, then I heard, "Stoi, don't move."
Wow.
And he put his gun at my head, and I thought, well, this was the end. Because easily he could say, well, he's stealing Soviet property, and that's
Illegal.
death penalty.
Death
for him.
penalty, right. But you did something quite remarkable. Your grandchildren actually graduated from French immersion at Charles Best. Yet the history of using French in our family goes way back to this incident. When he put his gun to your head and told you to stop, how did you respond?
There were some French prisoners of war in the area still, and I don't know why I said, "Parlez-vous français?" And he looked at me. It wasn't Russian, it wasn't German.
Yes.
And then I used some other words and used my hands like the French do, and said, "Franzose, Hungary." And I didn't know that, but Franzose means Frenchman in German, and Franzose means Frenchman in Russian.
Okay.
So he thought, "Oh, are you Frenchman?" I say, "Si." And then, "Oh, come to the front of the house. There are the bigger potatoes." And I packed my pockets with the big potatoes, and then I said, "Merci, camarade," and then we smiled at each other, and I took off.
Wow. So your quick thinking in using the French language actually
I
saved your
didn't
life.
think at all. It
You
just
didn't
came.
think. Yeah, exactly. Wow. So then you got on the train, and that guardian angel, so to speak, managed to talk the train conductor into letting you stay on the train. And then the train went to Stettin?
No, Stettin we started.
Oh, wait, Stettin you started. And then you went from there to?
Kreuz was
Kreuz.
it. And I fell asleep there, and when I woke up, I looked at the signs there, and it said Kreuz. So I said, okay, fine, I have to move out here.
Okay. And So how far would you have been from your home at that point? Like, how many more train rides?
Oh, that was about a little over half of it.
Okay. So then from Kreutz, you took another train?
Yes,
Okay. Is that the one where you had to ride on top of the boxcar?
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, the same situation as in Stettin. I asked the first one and he didn't answer. And then I got someone who said, well, there is no passenger train going in that direction. But then in about 20 minutes, there is a freight train going. And I thought, well, it's a train and it takes me there,
Mm-hmm.
so take it.
Okay.
And I had an incident there as well. While I was waiting there, a drunken Russian soldier comes on the other platform and he molests the people there and pees on the tracks there.
Mm-hmm.
And Polish trainman comes and tells him to leave the platform. He takes a swing at him and he falls on the floor.
Mm-hmm.
He comes with two other people, there were three of them, and they take him by the arm and he says, don't touch a Russian officer.
Mm-hmm.
And he gives him a swing again.
Right.
And then they go back and bring in a Russian soldier, and he comes in there, he puts his hand around his shoulder and says, come on, let's go.
Okay.
And so then he left, and while this was happening, the train arrived, and I could climb up on the boxcar on the back side.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody was watching the incident on the other platform, and so I could, without being detected,
Mm-hmm.
climb up to the top of the boxcar and drive
On the
the
roof.
freight train on the roof.
Wow. So you used the opportunity of a diversion
Yes,
to cover what you needed to do to get away.
and always something somehow happened together.
Wow.
I can't
Explain it.
explain it. It's divine
Intervention.
intervention. Yeah.
Yeah. So then from there you took the train to
To Dirschau.
Derschau. And you got off in Derschau and there was a river that you needed to cross.
Yes. And the bridge was damaged, or you couldn't get, and we had to go on the ferry. And I went on the ferry there, and I had no ticket there either, so I had to walk around there. And there was hiding behind a Polish truck, and I spoke to the truck driver where he was going, and he said to Marienburg.
Mm-hmm.
That's the city where I went to boarding school. That was
Okay.
my home city. And I asked him if he could take me along, and he said, how much are you paying me? And I said, I have no money, or then I won't take you.
Okay.
But I was bigger than he was, and when he left, I then went on the back of his truck, and he told me he didn't dare to throw me out.
So you managed to hitch a ride, so to speak,
Yeah.
on the back of the truck to Marienburg.
Yeah,
And now Marienburg was 30 kilometers from
my home village.
your home village
Yeah.
of Alt Rosengard.
And again, the train was going to go in about 2 days,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't want that to wait that long. So I thought 30 kilometers I can walk, shorter than 750.
Yes.
So I went on, and I walked, and I met a Russian soldier. He asked me where I was going, and I told him I'm going home to my place, and I showed him my identification. He couldn't read. He held it upside down, and then I went at midnight on the 1st of August 1945. I arrived at our farm.
Right. And your mom came down and opened the door for you once she knew it was you.
Well, I had no idea if my mom was there, where
Right.
she was. This was just a guess The first
Mhm.
guest I thought I'll try home, and then I'll see if she is not there, I have to find out where she might be.
Right.
And so I knocked at the night. I knocked at the bedroom window where I knew where my parents' bedroom was,
Mhm.
and there was the answer. My mother was there,
Mhm.
and when she came and opened the door, we had a big hug,
Yeah.
and tears ran over our eyes, and then she told me her story, what
Mm.
happened.
Now she was very frail at the time. She was recovering from something, wasn't she?
From typhoid fever.
Fever. So she wasn't well. So
And
Um.
I think if I wouldn't have come, I wonder if she would have survived.
really,
They had nothing to eat anymore.
oh my goodness.
She had been taken for slave labor by the Russians for about 3 months. And when she came back home, her house was ransacked,
Mm.
and all the food was gone, all the valuables were gone. There was a real mess in there,
Hmm.
and she practically had to live at what the garden and nature provided for her.
Hmm. Now that was kind of a common theme with the treatment of the German people after the war ended.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, my mother couldn't. The Poles wouldn't sell us anything, no groceries.
hmm.
So we had to be on our own.
Wow.
And
So
it was summer, so we had a big garden and an orchard, and so there was something to eat.
mhm.
And salad was taken from edible weeds.
Mhm. So
Because-
really your knowledge and your mom's knowledge of the plants you could eat and what you could do with them is what helped you survive.
Yeah,
Wow. So there was a large part of Germany in the east, Silesia and Pomerania and East Prussia and West Prussia, that were annexed by the Russians, and then some of it was given to Poland.
most of it was.
Most
given.
of it was given to Poland. How many people, German citizens, were expelled from their homes?
Well, in general, there are different estimates. In general, there were about 14 million from all the West Prussia, East Prussia, and Galicia, where Germans lived in Poland. I think from East and West Germany, there were about 12 million.
Wow. So there's probably a little over 5 million people in BC.
Yeah,
So we're looking at probably almost 3 times the population of British Columbia was expelled from their homes.
yeah.
And
BC
these were,
BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan.
yeah. So this was civilian Germans, many of whom had not been at the front,
No,
and they were mistreated and starved and removed from their homes after the war ended.
yeah.
Wow.
Well, I know my aunt, she died of starvation,
Hmm.
and if I wouldn't have come, my mother very likely would have starved of, would have died of starvation as well.
Hmm.
So I had to provide some food for her. She hadn't had any bread for months.
Wow.
So I went into a wheat field, which had not been harvested, belonged to the parents of my aunt, and the Russians had shot him and his son
Mhm.
because they were capitalists, owning of a big farm. But I took a pair of scissors, cut the ears of those wheat
Wheat sheaves.
sheaves, and prepared them.
Mm.
My father had a grinding mill
Mm.
for the animal food, but it worked out for the
to make flour for your
Yeah,
bread.
to grind the flour for a few months for bread.
So really your survival to a large degree depended on your ingenuity
Oh yes,
to make
oh yes,
do and figure out how to get the things that you needed.
yeah.
Yeah.
And then there was one thing, I walking along the street and the Polish police came and took me with them to work for the mayor of our village.
Mm.
He was living in the next village yet because there was a police station and he was protected there. I had to care for his cows,
Mm.
and as a payment for 8 hours of work, I got 1 liter of milk, and that was very valuable for us.
Mm.
When I later on got typhoid fever as well, that was about the only thing that I could keep in my stomach.
Right. So it actually helped you survive.
Yes.
Wow. Wow. And just as a little anecdote about the treatment of the German people by the invading forces like the Russians, what happened to your mother's parents, your grandparents?
We talked to the neighbor. My grandparents were about 2.5 or 3 kilometers away from us,
Mm-hmm.
and we saw that their house was burned down, and one of the neighbors said if they had Russian soldiers in the house, and he said he saw that they were walking over to my grandparents' place, and shortly afterwards the house burned,
Mm.
and they came back and were kind of laughing. And
Wow.
I know later on I went there and Stoker and
Looked around.
look around and in the ashes, and I found some bones.
Hmm.
And my mother said, "Don't disturb that. Leave it alone." And I think that were the bones of my grandparents on my aunt.
Wow. So in the midst of a tremendous amount of trauma, you had to think on your feet and be ready at any moment to, like, you went back to get your mother, and that was in August. How long were you then at the farm with your mom?
We left on the 3rd of December.
Okay, so all of the fall you were
Yeah,
there.
yeah.
Now, was it like you spent your days looking for food, or were there times when you were disturbed by invading military?
Well, I was working for the Polish mayor,
Okay.
and the Russians came occasionally there and ransacked the house. I remember once I came back from work, and my mother said, "Do you notice anything?" I looked around and think, "Oh, the piano is gone."
Hmm.
Yeah, she says, "I was playing piano, as I sometimes do when I'm lonely, and there happened to be 3 Russian soldiers under the window. They listened, came in and said I should play that to them again. And then when I was finished, they picked up the piano and took it away."
Hmm. And what about the time when they thought they accused you of having stolen something?
Oh yeah, the were 3 Russians came again, ransacked the house for whatever was still left there. They took away, and one was a little drunk, which they are most of the time, and they left, and one saw there was the basement window where, and he said, "Well," he came back, the 2 left, and the one came back and told me I have to show them that's in the basement, and then that was flooded, and so there was nothing that he could use, and then he went a different way than the other 2 went.
Hmm.
Our farm was between 2 roads, and they went to the road, to the northern road, and he went to the road on the southern side. And Mother said, "This is wrong. You have to go that way." don't talk to me. I want to do what I want. And the other two came back and accused me of having killed him. And mother tried to tell them, no, that's not the case. He went the wrong way. But he said, no, I don't believe you. So I had to stand against the wall, raise my hands while they were loading their guns and pointing their guns at me. And I don't know why they didn't pull the trigger. I was quite prepared. I said, this is the end of my life. And I had a good life so far. Well, not always, but
Yes.
I said, well, fine. I said, Mom, that's it. I wish God will guide you and help you out of this here when I'm gone. But they didn't pull the trigger. And they said, well, we'll try to find out if that's true what you said. If not, we'll come back and shoot both of you and put your house on fire. Now, we didn't have a good sleep that night. And then next day we went into the village, and one of the neighbors told me the story. He said there were people calling a name, or the Russian soldier that had left us came to his house and he wanted to have supper. And he prepared something for him, and then he heard somebody calling a name outside on the street, and he told this Russian soldier, they are calling for you. Doesn't matter. You give me some food. And but he snuck out and talked to those two fellows. Say, I think the fellow that you're looking for is in my place here. And they came, and that was true, and they took him away, and that was the end of the story.
So you lived almost in constant fear of what was going to happen.
Oh yeah, we were constantly. And especially women, I could tell you one story. We had somebody had planted some potatoes, and they shared it with us. And I went with my mother and two girls of our neighbor. We went to pick some potatoes, and then we heard some noise in the house close by there, and that went on for about 5 minutes or so. And then when it stopped, my mother went there. That was the mother of the two girls, and the Russians had come there and had asked them, where are the girls? And of course they didn't tell them, and so they took the frying pans and hit them, and they were quite bloody faces when she met them. So anything could happen.
Wow. So then, I guess you were trying to figure out what you should do. Should you leave? Should you stay? And then you got a notice.
Yeah, somebody took the final decision for us. A Polish police came and said, you have to leave your house and report to the Polish labor camp. We give you 3 days to pack stuff, and then we pick you up. And my mother said, okay, well, that's what life is like here now. And I said, no way, we are going to go there. We are escaping.
So your mom was a rule follower
Well,
to a degree.
She thought there was no other
There
choice.
was no other option.
Yeah,
And I think having risked your life to come and get her, you had a vision for something else being possible.
I didn't want this to be the end of my search, no.
Right. So I remember you saying that you had a very relatively new eiderdown quilt.
Yes.
What did you do?
Well, we had, my mother had packed some stuff that the Russians had left into a knapsack, and I couldn't carry one because my right shoulder was not was hurting quite a bit if I had put on these things. So I had 2 bags I put on my left shoulder, and Mom had the knapsack.
Mm.
And we went to the station, and when we had to change trains in the dark underground
Tunnel, the sort of the
Tunnel
connection.
to the next platform, a Polish young man jumped at Mother, cut a knife, and cut
Straps.
her straps, and took the knapsack away.
Hmm.
Well, I said, Mom, it was too heavy for you anyway, and what was in there wasn't worth very much.
Mm.
And then we went into the train, and the young man came and saw my 2 bags there, and he took one and wanted to get off, but I had tied them together, so I held on to the other one, and he was cursing me and was leaving.
Mm.
And in the one I had change of clothes, and in the other one I had the eiderdown, and I had put some
Patches.
patches on there, sewed them on 3 sides, and on the open side I had some feathers sticking out.
Okay.
So the next station, the young boy came back again with 2 Polish policemen,
Mm.
and he pointed out to me, and he gave me a hit with his rifle butt that I fell onto the ground, and then he took the one bag and gave it to the boy, and he took the other one, opened it, and said, "Oh, old cover, you can keep that." And he didn't know that it was a good eiderdown. If he would have known that, he would have taken that as well.
So the patches helped to disguise the fact that it was
Yes,
in good
yes.
shape.
And inside we had enrolled 1 can of syrup,
Hmm. Maple syrup or
no, not maple syrup. But just in
corn syrup.
no, sugar beet.
Okay, sugar beet.
Sugar
syrup.
beet, and the leather-bound Bible of my dad,
Mm.
where he had made some comments in there,
Mm.
and a few of our photos.
Wow.
The Russians had taken out all the photo albums, had thrown them into the snow outside, and most of the pictures were unusable. I
Mm.
picked out a few that were left, that you could still see the people there, recognize the people,
Mhm.
and I had put those in there as well. So that was all we took out from our home, what we wore, and this one
One bag
down,
with the
one
down.
back to the down.
Wow. So you traveled by train through what was now Poland
Yes,
to get to
Berlin.
Berlin. Now I want you to mention one thing just to show how things happened in such a way that really contributed to you being able to eventually get to safety in the West. The wire in the field.
Oh yeah, the station before we came to East Germany, we all had to get out of the compartment of the train.
So these were like box cars, right?
Yes,
And they just put you all in them.
yeah, we were about 16 or 18 people in the boxcar,
Okay.
and we all had to get out. And then after about 10 minutes, and some people were relieving themselves behind the bushes there, and I saw there was a bunch of rolled up wire, and I just put it in my pocket. I didn't know why,
Mm-hmm.
but and then when they told us we should go back into the compartment, we went back and I counted the people. I was the only, no, I was the only male person in the compound. No, there were another senior in there.
Okay.
And I counted them, they were all there. So I took the piece of wire and wired the sliding doors of the boxcar together so that that could not be opened from the outside. And I heard in the other next compartment, people were crying, help, help, don't hit me. And we knew they were relieving them of their valuables that they still had. And then they knocked at our door and couldn't get in there. They knocked louder. Police opened the door, and some of the elderly women said, well, open the door, otherwise they will shoot me, they will shoot us. And one of the younger women said, no, we'll help you. So we stood at the door and made sure they couldn't open the door. And they hit it again with their rifle butts and said, if you don't open, we'll shoot you all. And well, we said, we first have to get in here to shoot us. And then the signal came that the train was rolling out of the station, and they were all very happy that they could keep the few things that they still had.
Wow. So a piece of wire that you picked up for no known reason was able to keep you from an altercation with the police. Wow. And losing possessions.
Yeah.
So from there, you went to Berlin, and then you were moved to a refugee camp.
Well, Berlin, the people that had addresses where they could go, they will change trains or take or walk to their former
relative's house.
Relative's house, yeah.
Right. But you
And
didn't know where any of your family members were, did
No.
you?
And we didn't have any address, so they collected about 120 people and took us to a refugee camp.
Okay, and that was in Gentine?
In Gentine, yeah.
Okay. Now, you stayed there for how long?
Oh, for about 3 months, maybe.
Okay. And you celebrated your 20th birthday while you were there.
Yes.
And this always blows my mind. I want you to tell them the story of how you celebrated.
Well, I had, we again were 3 men. I was the young man. There was a 70 or 80-year-old man, and there was an invalid with a wooden leg. And I had chosen the bed beside the stove. They had a little more room.
Right.
We were 120 people in one dance hall, and we were 4 beds put together, a double
Bunk beds.
bunk beds, and then about a meter and a half bit in between, and there was the next one again. And where I was at the stove, I had a little more room, and I had volunteered to heat the stove, and I had also volunteered to bring the potatoes from the basement to the kitchen. And this was when my mother wanted to celebrate my 20th birthday, and I took a few of the potatoes that I had delivered to the kitchen and put them in the embers of the stove and roasted potatoes, and this was our main meal. And there was one woman had 3 children, and they all were sick, and we got a certain portion of bread every day, and she had saved 2 loaves of bread, and that bread was wouldn't last for more than 2 or 3 days.
Right.
It was, they say they put in some sawdust and some leaves
To try to stretch the
to
recipe.
stretch the recipe, yeah. So that wouldn't last very long. And so I bartered with her and she gave me a loaf of bread,
Mm.
because otherwise it would have been
Yeah.
gone. And I cut that, and I had the syrup that we had left. I had still some of it left, and so we had roasted potatoes and one slice of bread with syrup. That
Hmm.
was my banquet.
Hmm. So you
Food.
celebrated your 20th birthday with a special meal of a roasted potato.
And
Yeah.
yeah,
Wow. It's perspective. Very much so.
and we enjoyed it, and we had fun. There were, as I mentioned, most of them, almost all of them, were women and children.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one teacher there, and she said, the kids have nothing to do. Why don't we have teach them school?
Hmm.
And I said, okay, I'll help you. And so we had kind of a relationship then.
Hmm.
And I had, I think, 12 girls at my table.
In your class. Yeah.
No, I went in for my birthday party.
Oh, for your birthday party.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there was this feeling of making the best of what you had
Yeah.
at the time.
Yeah.
And I know that there was somebody who snored a lot, and you tied a string to their quilt and you would pull it, and they would wake up and wonder why their quilt was sliding down the bed. Like, just making the best of what you were.
Having some fun.
Exactly. Having some fun and making the best of what you were dealing with.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So from Gentine, there was a risk there, wasn't there? That.
Well, in Gentine, they had arranged that the people would be transported to West Germany.
Mm,
But my mother had shingles,
mm,
and she was in hospital, and so I couldn't go, or we couldn't go. And so we were put into, with a family, got one room with a family, and I was looking for some work, or to get some money,
mm-hmm.
and the neighbor wanted me to split wood for him for the winter, and I noticed while I was piling up the wood there was one of the Russian military police coming into the house where we lived,
Hmm.
and he had a green cap on, and I knew was a secret police.
Okay.
And when he came out again of the house, I hid behind my pile of wood that I had packed up there, and he didn't see me. And when I went back after my work was over, I went back, and the lady there in the house said, well, they were looking for you. They're looking for workers that could dismantle factories in the city and ship them to Russia.
Hmm.
And those who have dismantled them would put on the train with the machinery to Siberia, and they had to install them back in Siberia again. So I escaped that trip to Siberia.
Hmm. But you knew that was a definite risk, that they were looking for you and that you could be sent to do this work.
Yes, yes.
So that made you and your mother decide that you needed to leave.
Yeah, it was too dangerous, and my mother thought, well, you have gone through so much, and we are here now, close for safety. Now we want to be sure that they wouldn't take me out.
Right. So this was technically still East Germany,
East
right?
Germany, yeah.
And you couldn't catch a train to get out of there because you didn't have an address.
Well, we got a train
Mm-hmm.
to the,
To the border.
border city, Friedland,
Mm-hmm.
and there we asked if we could go over to West Germany, and they asked us if we have an address where we could go, and we didn't have one. We had heard that my mother's brother had escaped from East Prussia with his horse and buggy, and they were in a village, Hillerse,
Okay.
but we had no address and we didn't know whether that was true or not.
Okay.
So we went across the border illegally. One of the people who felt sorry for us and said, in the morning at 7 o'clock on the south entrance to the station will be a man. He takes people across the border illegally. So at 7 o'clock we were at the south entrance, and there was a man with a little hand wagon, and I nodded to him, and he nodded back, and I know that was a man, and he took us across the border. First we walked through the woods, and then when the woods ended, the path and into the woods ended, we walked just through the woods, and then he stopped, put his finger in his mouth, very quiet. We are crossing the frontier now, the border to West Germany, and then we walked very quietly for another 5 or 10 minutes. And when we came to a clearing, he stopped and said, "You are in West Germany now." And we really felt relieved now.
Yeah.
And there was no, just in the open field. And then we looked around and we saw in the distance under a tree was a truck standing. And we thought, okay, fine, there is some life. So we'll find out where we are and how to get on from here.
Right.
And when we got to the truck, it was a Red Cross truck, and she said, "Welcome in West Germany," and gave each one of us a cup of hot chocolate. And we asked her where, if she had heard of that village, Hillerse, and she said, "Yeah, that is not too far away from here. You take the train to Leiferde, the station, and from there it's about 8 kilometers to Hillerse." So we took the train, got out in Leiferde. It was a no man's land. There was no village, nothing, just a road crossing. And we thought, well, okay, where we go from here? And then Mother saw a horse and buggy at the end of the station there, and she said, "Okay, I'll ask if that person knows where Hillerse is." And she went up to the carriage there, and she noticed it was her brother. And
Her brother was running a taxi.
was a horse and buggy taxi, and he was waiting at the station, seeing if somebody else wanted to go back to the village,
Wow.
Hillerse.
That must have been an amazing surprise.
That was really a surprise.
Wow. So then you were safe.
And we were safe. He took us to his place, and the where they stayed. We stayed in the factory. They had a big room there. They had nine children, and the 2 parents, and the 9 children lived in one big room, the dining room of the staff of the factory, and they put us in there, and then I got a job, and if we got a job, we got accommodation, and then we left Hillerse and went to Handorf, and I started to work there.
How do you feel about Remembrance Day, Dad? as a veteran? What is your take on it? I know we wear poppies and we remember what was done for us, for freedom. But what is your take on this?
Well, I think of the wars, the First World War, where my father took part in it, and he suffered from that war, I think. It's not easy for a soldier, or we as soldiers were drilled to shoot and to kill, and that was all soldiers, no matter if we wore a swastika on our swastika or hammer and sickle or God is with us on our belt buckle, uniform belt buckle. We all were trained that way. And for some people, it was difficult. Who was our enemy? They wore a different uniform, spoke a different language, but they were human beings created in God's image. And they were fathers, sons, brothers, sweethearts. And if we would pull the trigger on one of them, their husbands, wives would be widows, the children would be orphans, sweetheart would be heartbroken. So that, for some of us more sensitive people, that gave us a feeling of guilt. And that sometimes, like my father, had this feeling, I think, of having done something wrong. And he carried that for years. And it came to a point, and besides that he had malaria, recurring malaria bouts, and together with this kind of guilt, came to the point that he was taking his own life. PTSD.
Right. They actually now are starting to call PTSD, as it relates to war, as moral injury.
Yeah.
Is the name, to denote having to live with something that you've done that is completely against what you believe.
Yeah, that First World War, Second World War was not much difference.
Right.
So I went through the war, got wounded, and these are the memories of it. Did you do the right thing? But I had no choice. If I would not have followed the draft, I would have been court-martialed and shot.
Right. You were initially drafted to report for the SS.
Yes, that's right.
And you said no. Or you
Well, the
ignored
SS
it.
at the beginning was a voluntary group.
Okay.
And I thought, well, if they are voluntary, they can't draft me. But that was not true anymore at the end of the war.
Okay.
At the last year of war. If I wouldn't have gone, I would have had to take the consequences. But then I volunteered to go to the Air Force. I had been in the Hitler Youth. I was in the Air Cadet. It's similar to the Air Cadets.
Right.
And I had a pilot's license for what do you call it? That
Oh, hang gliders.
hang gliders, yes. And so I thought that was suitable. But then, as you mentioned before, we had enough pilots and not enough planes and not enough fuel. So I was put in the unit that was infantry.
Wow. So you mentioned that to me once, that U.S. General Sherman said something about war. Do you remember that quote?
Yeah. I get sick and tired of killing. War is hell, and it cannot be refined.
Hmm. So, I actually read a paper that you wrote in 1952 for a college course about the way of peace and passive resistance to as an answer for war in the world.
I don't remember that.
No, we found it actually among some of your books and belongings. And what can we do to prevent this horrendous threat of an event that we live with?
Well, I read a little story, a loving story. Elementary school teacher, grade 3 teacher, tells the mother about her daughter in class. And in her class was a boy who came from a very abusive home, and he was bullying the girls, and especially this little girl. And one day he was very crucial again.
Very cruel to her.
Cruel
Yeah.
to her
Yeah.
in bullying him. And she gets the surprise of her class. She goes over to this boy, gives him a hug, and says, "I love you, and God loves you too."
Mm.
And the boy was so surprised about that this came from his victim, that he stopped bullying the girls, and he
Mhm.
worked peacefully together with them, and they accepted him in his circle. And this was in a way, what do you call it?
An example?
Me-
Metaphor.
metaphorically speaking, how to end war and to make peace.
Mm.
So I found out, if you are kind to people, they are kind to you.
Mm.
If you are available to them, they will open up to you and tell you their problems and get relief.
Mm.
So we have to build relationships where we are kind relationships. And if that is continued between countries as well, then we will have peace. But wars have been fought to solve problems, sometimes to get justice, usually to win power over somebody else and control over them. And that has been the case through millennia. Wars have been fought to achieve that, and I'm sure they will be fought in future again. Only I think we will be a little more careful, because we have now weapons that are used for mass destruction.
So our need to work for peace and to build relationships between people and between countries is more important than ever.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dad.
You're welcome.